Well, it's my pleasure to introduce most of you to a new story, which is Vox Royalty Corp. We are actually far from a new business, but we are one of the most recent entrants in the royalty space, just having listed on May 25th. Vox Royalty Co., which will probably surprise many of you, has actually been the fastest growing royalty company on the planet, and that's bar none. That's everybody from the multi-billion-dollar majors down to some of the new entrants. Vox has been the fastest growing royalty company on the planet. We've been able to do that because we've assembled really an industry-leading team in terms of experts specific to the royalty and streaming space. And we have also grown what is the most significant independently acquired intellectual property in the royalty space in a package of 7,000 proprietary royalties that we acquired as part of our initial listing on May 25th. We have a pipeline of transactions that is really unmatched in the industry at this stage. And that pipeline of transactions is allowing us to lead the industry in growth. But it's not just that we're leading the industry in growth, it's that we're able to find transactions that we can bring into our portfolio at really great relative value. At a high level, we are a precious metals focused business in terms of royalties. We generally agree with Eric's thesis on what's happening in the markets, especially as it relates to gold. When there are transactions and opportunities for us to find great relative value in other commodities, we will absolutely acquire those royalties. And as Eric alluded to, in that next wave of commodity price upswing, we'll be very well positioned in that market. But right now, we are very, very focused on gold and precious metals. Many of you are somewhat familiar with the royalty space. I think what's interesting about royalty companies is they've outperformed basically any commodity price benchmark or benchmark of performance that you can throw at it. That's obviously for a couple reasons, the biggest of which is risk mitigation, and then also the non-dilutive nature of owning royalties over very interesting assets. We believe that we are positioned to outperform the royalty sector overall, which has been a high performer now for the better part of the last 20 years. One thing to note is that royalty companies have exceptional growth in their first few years as public businesses. Most of us are familiar with the successes of Wheaton, Royal, and Franco. But interestingly, their first 3 years, they've seen almost exponential level growth in their share price. And that's also been reflected and consistent with some of the more recent entrants that have entered the market, like Mavericks and Metallic. As I mentioned, our team is led by a cadre of industry experts when it comes to royalties. We've been very strategic about allocating our team around the world. We also have a very technically heavy team. We believe that we can find value where others don't necessarily see it because of a technical team being on the front lines of our business. We have mining engineers and geos with renowned experience in their respective capacities at the technical level. And our technical analysis on assets really leads the way in terms of portfolio allocation and which royalties we buy and the discipline with which we execute. We've also built a team that's worldwide. We are seeing more deal flow from around the world that combines with our intellectual property and gives us a very unique edge in the marketplace to continue our growth at this great relative value. And we have a team that also combines extensive commercial and capital markets experience that allows us to connect the dots from great opportunity to a deal acquired and brought into the portfolio. Our growth has been exponential. We've been the fastest growing royalty company on the planet, which we're very proud of. One of the ways that we're able to do that is by being in front of the most deals and being in front of deal flow that others are not. And we are able to drive that value as a result of our ability to be in bilateral situations. And what that means is we're buying royalties directly and not in a process, but directly from the owner or vendor or seller of that royalty versus a boardroom to boardroom run process where bankers are driving up prices of assets in auction processes. We are actually in front of very unique sellers of royalties, many of which that are under the radar. And this allows us to drive both the growth, but growth at great relative value, be it on a cash flow basis or PNAV basis. We're able to find deals that are, frankly, at great prices by any metric. Some of that growth for Vox is directly attributable to the intellectual property that we acquired over the last couple of years. We acquired a royalty database of 7,000 proprietary royalties from Mineral Royalties Online. This was really a unique opportunity for our business as we wanted to build and continue to leverage our competitive advantages in the marketplace. This proprietary advantage allows us to find royalties that others don't know about in the space, but then also transact with extreme efficiency. And I'll go into a little detail of how that works. We're able to quickly look at royalties, many of which that are not known to the other comps in the space, and understand if a mining tenement has reserves and resources, is there a royalty over it, and who is the owner of that royalty. We were able to find royalties that have been held by telecom companies, hearing aid companies, and 3D printing companies. And in some cases, royalties that the owner of the royalty didn't even know that they owned. In these situations, we're able to drive value for our shareholders. We're able to find non-core holders of royalties that would like to bring that value forward and monetize a non-core asset. And it allows us to really build a portfolio at great value while unlocking value for the sellers of royalties and for their respective companies and interests. At a high level, as I alluded to, we are a precious metals focused royalty company. We obviously are very big believers in what's going on in the gold markets. Agree with Eric's sentiment there. And we are very focused in Australia, where we have significant competitive advantages, but also what we believe is one of the best gold markets that there is. It's a very safe jurisdiction. And we have a preponderance of opportunities that's both database driven and our deal networks that bring new royalty opportunities to the table. Interesting about our portfolio is really the embedded growth. We have a great portfolio of assets organically creating value for our shareholders. We have royalties that are coming up the curve aggressively from exploration to development and development going into producing, which yields cash flow to our business. We have exponential growth in that category. Overall, royalties in general, we are growing our portfolio by essentially more than double every year, but we're also seeing exponential growth in terms of assets in our portfolio that are going from development to producing, and then that cash flow growth is also exponential. This is some of the organic growth that's occurring within the portfolio in terms of assets that are either producing now, and then assets that are coming within the portfolio that have been development stage that are going to be coming into production and driving that cash flow growth that we talked about. One of the things we're very proud of is, even though we're a new entrant in the space, in most of those scenarios, you're seeing companies enter with maybe one royalty or just a couple, and those royalties are primarily with one or two counterparties. We've been able to really build a portfolio of assets spread across very quality counterparties, giving us that diversification, and we've reached that level of critical mass, which is really important for a royalty company, that we now have that diversification of risk, which is one of the big reasons to own royalty companies, with very quality counterparties, but then also very significant growth potential within that portfolio that's embedded really free growth for our shareholders. There's a couple highlight assets for us that really bring to light how we find assets and what we look for. Koolyanobbing is a producing iron ore royalty held by the fastest growing iron ore producer in Mineral Resources. This will yield about $1 million in cash flow for us starting next year, and we bought it for about $2.5 million, which is really industry leading relative value. Pedra Branca, some of you may be familiar with this. It's run by Valeore, the Discovery Group of companies, and Pedra Branca is the largest undeveloped and developing platinum group metals project in South America. We're very excited about this royalty. We're very excited about the project. And since we purchased the royalty, it actually split in two. So we have the world-class PGM potential, and then we also have a really high-grade, very prospective vanadium target that's now been split into two royalties, where a maiden resource is expected very soon. Bowdens is the largest undeveloped primary silver project in all of Australia. This is a potentially world-class opportunity and is one of the most significant silver royalties that we've seen in the market for quite some time, and also a royalty that we were able to find through our unique competitive advantage in intellectual property, finding a royalty that frankly very few people knew about that we were able to bring into the portfolio at great relative value for our shareholders. Ashburton is a 1.77 million ounce resource held by an Australian gold major. This is one of those elephants or acorns in our portfolio that in the next few years has potential to be brought in production in a number of different scenarios that we acquired at great relative value, but has the potential to really bring value to our shareholders in a very, very significant way. The Dry Creek royalty was really an interesting opportunity that we were able to find, leveraging our unique team on the ground in Australia, but also with our database. It was a royalty that was structured in 1992 that, frankly, most people have forgotten about or didn't even know about at all, that we were able to transact on. This has very significant near-term potential in terms of gold production for us on a very interesting asset by a great operator in RNC. Mount Ida is a near-term producing gold royalty that we acquired from a hearing aid company, of all companies. And we were able to find this again through leveraging our database and our intellectual property and team on the ground in Australia. This company and this asset in particular, after we purchased the royalty, was sold to a private equity company because they saw what we had seen, which was really kind of underneath what was available in the public markets. And we have now brought a very interesting gold royalty into our portfolio at great relative value. Vox is a very new entrant in the public markets, but we are far from a new company. We have been creatively building our intellectual property, our team, and our exposure to worldwide sources of royalty transactions that is driving very significant growth for our business and our shareholders. We've achieved critical mass in terms of creating a portfolio that gives investors that diversification of risk, but with immense upside and re-rating potential. We will continue to have a pipeline that is growing faster than anybody else in the space and at better relative value than anybody else in the sector. And it's that growth combined with great relative value that I think really differentiates the Vox story from some of the more recent entrants in the royalty space. We will continue to see new transactions brought into the portfolio that create even more significance in terms of cash flow and producing assets. But organically, we are always creating royalties. We expect to be closing at least one royalty deal per month, and we see that number going significantly higher. So when you think about Vox, it's really that we have an immense number of near-term catalysts in terms of royalties that we'll be acquiring, but also it's the organic growth that happens within our portfolio with us never having to pay another dollar. And this team having very clearly articulated to the market that we're very disciplined in our capital allocation. We're buying great royalties at great prices now, but as they continue to develop and as these assets move closer to production, the re-rating potential across our entire portfolio is very significant, and we expect to really outperform the royalty sector as a whole. So thank you.